Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great day. Last week I made a post on Instagram about how I feel like I've kind of stuck myself in a music making cycle recently. Also, follow me on Instagram at @JacobSutherlandMusic. I wanted to shake things up a bit, and so I got myself a small portable MIDI controller. I realized that ever since I first discovered GarageBand in like 2005 on the family Mac, I've only ever used full 88 key keyboards as my MIDI controllers. I wanted to free myself up to go outside with something more portable, and I wanted something that had pads on it. In the past, I have borrowed a piece of equipment that has the MIDI pads on it, but that was not mine, and I really only used it for video filming purposes and not for arranging or experimenting or playing around. So, this is the Akai MPK Mini. It's like the most popular low-budget MIDI controller out there, and it's mine now. I've been having a lot of fun with it all week, just playing and experimenting and letting myself do some arranging outside. But the reason I'm making this video, which you should be able to tell from the title, is I pretty quickly fell down a rabbit hole of making 8-bit music. Something about playing with a small, fun electronic piece of equipment took me right back to the days of playing Game Boy after school and to the sounds of playing Game Boy after school. I've messed around with synths before, like I know what a sine wave and a square wave and a sawtooth wave are, but I had never really looked into a Game Boy chiptune emulator that I could use on Logic until about 7 days ago. This is YMCK's Magic 8-bit plugin. It's free, it can work on any DAW, and it's basically the only thing I've been playing with for the last week. So in classic YouTuber fashion, I wanted to share my 8-bit journey with you in what I am very unofficially dubbing the 4 phases of making 8-bit music. My 4 phases of making 8-bit music so far this week. Yes! I'm not a computer engineer, I'm not a scientist, I have a degree in theater, but I did learn a little bit about the Game Boy sound chip when I was online searching for an emulator or a plugin. So it's similar to the original NES sound chip. The Game Boy hardware has 4 sound channels, 2 pulse waves that do slightly different things, but they each play either a square wave or a 25% pulse wave or a 12.5% pulse wave. It has 1 noise channel, which is how they usually create the percussion sounds, and 1 arbitrary wave channel, which is similar in function to the triangle wave, but not like exactly the same. The Magic 8-bit plugin has a triangle wave, so I'm gonna be using the triangle wave. This means that all of the music that was created on the Game Boy sound chip, like every single song you heard coming out of these little speakers, all was made with only 4 sounds at a time maximum, which is ridiculous to think about. I love all the problem solving that would go into creating these songs and creating these really memorable songs with only 4 sounds. So when I downloaded Magic 8-bit, the first thing I wanted to do was see if I could recreate a familiar 8-bit tune. I was feeling nostalgic, that's what got me started on this whole 8-bit kick, so I decided to take it back to a song that's very close to my heart, the Goldenrod City theme from Pokemon Gold. This was the first song I ever learned how to play entirely by ear, and it started a trend that still exists to this day of me not spending enough time practicing reading sheet music and instead spending all of my time working out my own arrangements on piano by ear. Abby, do you want to be in the video? You got her little face right on the screen. Oh, you just need so much attention. But back to the 8-bit version. So I listened really closely to the original Goldenrod City theme, and in recreating it, I got the melody line and set it to the 50% square wave. Because each channel can only play 1 note at a time, up here it's just set to 1, so that every time I trigger a new note, the old one cuts off immediately. And I gave it a little bit of vibrato here with a delay of 0.24 and the depth of 0.1, so it's a very small bit of vibrato, but it adds that little bit of character. Without the vibrato, it sounds like this. But with that little bit, it sounds like this. And then playing the melody sounds like this. Like, that's the sound. It's almost magic. It's like it's coming out of the Game Boy, and it just triggers that little satisfaction center of my brain. I've got the lead playing that melody. And then actually right after that, I was listening closely to the original, and you can hear it switches to the 25% pulse wave. So the first channel is playing the melody. The second channel is playing a counterpoint to the melody, and it's using the 12.5 pulse. Together, the melody and the counterpoint sound like this. Then it goes into something that I think is super cool. Because each channel on the sound chip can only play one note at a time, there was no way to layer a lot of notes for chords. So the way that the composers and musicians would get around that is just playing the chords, but really quickly arpeggiated. So instead of being able to play the C sharp major chord, like all of the notes, it could only play one note at a time with these arpeggios. The bass line is taken care of by that third channel, which is the triangle wave on the 8-bit plugin. I'm not like an expert on this, but I read it's because the triangle wave is closest in shape to the neutral sine wave, so it's the best for a straight tone playing those lower frequency notes. And that sounded legitimate enough to me. I'm not a physicist, but that checks out to me. Triangle wave, no vibrato, just straight tones. Pretty simple, sounds like this. With everything else, sounds like this. So last is the noise channel, which is usually used to create percussion sort of noises, imitating a hi-hat or a snare or sounds like that. It's still pitched, so the high notes sound different than the low notes. And here with a relatively short decay, I kind of recreated the snare sort of sound that I heard in the Goldenrod City original version. And then I did add another layer of the noise channel, which the Game Boy technically couldn't do, but I wanted to get a lower kick sound that sort of brought a little more power to that percussion line. So the kick is just a very low noise channel. And together with the snare sounds like this. That's all four of the Game Boy Color sound chip channels. You've got the two pulse waves, you've got the triangle wave, or the wave that's not exactly a triangle wave but similar, and the noise channel, and together my recreation sounds like this. So I was playing around with the MPK Mini, just playing with some of those 8-bit sounds, and I started playing around with the pitch bend joystick. I've always had keyboards that have the pitch bend wheel, but this joystick was a little bit of a different tactile experience. And while playing around with it, just kind of noodling around, I ended up stumbling upon a melody that I have heard nearly every day for the last 5 months. So I was like, oh, I bet I could make a pretty cool Animal Crossing New Horizons theme with just these 8-bit sounds and the MPK Mini. And I've basically already figured out the first instrument, the trumpet. I used the 25% pulse wave. I gave it a vibrato with a really long delay, which sounds like this. So when you're playing the short notes, there's no vibrato, but then when you hold it out for long enough, it just kind of has a little bit of that vibrato in the end. The decay is also super long with a low sustain, so that it just kind of gradually goes down in volume, and that serves as the melody line. Then I moved on to the second sound that you hear, which is the ukulele sound, and this is one of the first times that I broke away from the Game Boy limitations. I didn't limit myself to just one voice per instrument or per wave channel. So the ukulele I've got on the 50% pulse wave. The release is pretty long so that the strings kind of ring a little bit. No vibrato, no pitch bend, but that on its own sounds like this. And then the bass comes in, which is again using the triangle wave and is very similar to the bass sound in the Goldenrod City theme. A few changes. I gave it a little bit of a quick decay into a pretty normal sustain so that it kind of sounds like a pluck of a string. I also did a little bit of breaking away from the format of the Game Boy again because I rolled off some of the highest frequencies with an EQ on the channel. Without the EQ, it sounds like this. verses. It gets rid of some of that buzziness at the top, and with so many more instruments playing at the same time, I just wanted to kind of use this channel to only play those bass notes. And that sounds like this. The next thing I tried to imitate with the 8-bit sounds was the shaker. I did the same thing that I did with the bass, but on the opposite side. So with the bass, I cut some of the high frequencies. With this, I cut a lot of the low frequencies out so that you just have that high sound of the shaker. To imitate the shaker, I wanted to recreate that sort of like, that shaker sound, like the actually, let me see if I've got that egg shaker around here. To get that emphasis on the 1 and the 3, you do like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And I wanted to imitate that, but on the noise channel. So I did like a high loud note, and then a low quiet one, and then a middle, and then a low. So it should be doing like the da 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 da. That on its own sounds like this. And then I just kind of went through a similar process, recreating every instrument from the original New Horizons theme that I could hear, approximating it in the best 8-bit sound. Like the guitar here is similar to the ukulele, and actually, one of the things that I played around with a lot on this one was automation of the releases. Here on the guitar track, the release is around 1 second, it's at 0.928, so that some of the chords ring out a little bit. But here I automated the release to be a much longer release so that that chord, that strum sort of rings out longer. And then I took it back down, brought it up a little bit, and then this chord rings out for like 4 seconds. So I did a lot of release time automation on a lot of these tracks. I did it on the ukulele, on the guitar, on this high synth that plays at the end. One of the other things I wanted to watch out for, because I wasn't sticking to the 1 note per channel sort of guide, but I did still try not to have 2 different channels playing the exact same note. So like here in the ukulele, this, the middle right here was taken up by the notes in the trumpet. Together with the trumpet, it fills out that chord a lot more, and you're not layering a ukulele note on that F natural with the trumpet also on the F natural. So that was just another thing that I kept in mind while working on this arrangement. And after all was said and done, this is what I've got. So this third phase of my week of making 8-bit music started when I, along with everyone else in the world, was listening to Taylor Swift's new album, Folklore. I got to one of the songs on the album, Invisible String, and I'm sure you can see where this is going. I thought, that could make a good 8-bit arrangement. So with this one, I kind of tried to lean into the pop production aspect of it, even though this is still a very like acoustic sounding song as far as pop songs go. The first thing to recreate was the guitar picking pattern, and for that I used the 50% square wave. I actually gave it a little bit of a pitch bend into the note, so it sounds like this. If I turned it up, it would sound like this. But I kept it super low and brief just so that it's like a little bit of texture that's a different way to emulate the picking of a string. I also separated it into 2 tracks because the downbeat of each measure, the very first string pick, I wanted to ring out longer than the rest of them. So I've got the downbeats on this track, and then the rest of the guitar picking notes have a much shorter release. And together, they sound like this. Then there was a second guitar part that I could hear in the mix, so I did another Magic 8-bit channel with very similar parameters, even less of a pitch bend, just a tiny bit. I applied a slightly different EQ to this one, just to make the guitars have a slightly different sound quality, even though they're both this 50% square wave. Also slightly panned, a little bit quieter. That with the other 2 sounds like this. The bass track was very similar to the bass in the Animal Crossing song and in Goldenrod City. It was the triangle wave. I did roll off a lot of the high end with this EQ here, and I did actually give it a little bit of a scoop up into the note like I have been doing with the guitars, just because that's kind of a consistent thing that I've been doing throughout this arrangement for this song. The bass on its own sounds like this. And with the rest of the guitars, sounds like this. For the percussion, when I was listening to the original version of Invisible String, I heard this snare pattern that kind of went like where it was kind of rising and falling in volume. So I recreated that here. And then I actually did something that I haven't done on any of the other songs so far. I stepped away from the Magic 8-bit plugin and I found an audio sample online of an 8-bit style kick drum. With this song that has a little bit more of a pop production sound, I wanted a kick drum that had a little more boom, had a little more like power to it than what I could get out of the Magic 8-bit noise channel. This is the only sample that I used that's not from the Magic 8-bit plugin, but with the snare drum and this kick sample together they sound like this. After I finished all of the backing track stuff, the only thing left was the lead vocal, and just like the trumpet on the Animal Crossing song, I did use the pitch bend joystick on the MPK Mini a lot to kind of give those slides between notes. So with all of those elements put together, my 8-bit version of Invisible String sounds like this. After having learned about the Game Boy 8-bit sound chip and what 8-bit sounds sound good together and how they're all kind of used, taking everything I learned from rearranging these other songs, I wanted to take the next step and create some original 8-bit music. So this is the first 8-bit song that I wrote and arranged using just the Magic 8-bit plugin and the MPK Mini. I started off by creating a chord progression, and because I wanted to stay in that 8-bit style, I wanted to have all of the chords be arpeggios rather than like the full chords played all notes at the same time. So as it turns out, the MPK Mini has an arpeggiator. So when I turned that on, I was able to just play the chords and they would come out as arpeggios. After I recorded the arpeggiated chord progression into Logic, I switched the order of the notes so that like the second repeat is an inversion where the lowest note becomes the highest note. So instead of this over and over again, it becomes this. After that, I switched over to the square wave and just played around with a melody line until I had something I was satisfied with. Then I created a bass line with the triangle wave, just the same as I've done with every other song before, and using the chord progressions from the arpeggios, kind of came up with a bass line. Now for percussion, because I had created so many percussion sounds between all of the previous songs that I was rearranging, and because I have the MPK Mini which has the little MIDI drum pads, I created a custom drum kit using the 8-bit sounds that I've made with the noise channel throughout all of these other songs. This is the sampled kick from Invisible String. This is the kick from Goldenrod City. These are both snares from Goldenrod City. These are the two shakers from the Animal Crossing song. And then these are the toms from the Animal Crossing song. So playing on the MIDI pads, I created the whole drum track to go along with the instruments that I'd already laid down, and that sounds like this. And the last thing I added to this song was a counterpoint to the melody, very similar to what the Goldenrod City theme had done. The lead and the counterpoint sound like this. Then I copied and pasted that a few times. I varied the sections so that each section has a little bit of a difference between it. I made a new drum beat for some of the sections, and at the end, after everything, this is what I came up with. All of the songs that I made for this video, I'm going to have a download link in the description. The songs will be hosted on my Patreon page, so you don't have to be a patron to access them, but they'll be right there on my Patreon page, so while you're there, check it out. Check out the other perks that you can get from becoming a patron. Things like early access to my videos, your name at the end of my videos, a whole bunch of other cool stuff. Thank you to my current patrons. Your support is what enables me to do videos like this. And thank you for being here on this 8-bit journey with me. I've gotten a lot of that initial desire to just make 8-bit music out of my system now because I've spent all week doing it, but it's been so much fun. I'll have a link to download YMCK's Magic 8-bit plugin in my description just in case you want to download it and play with it. I'll also leave a link to where I got that one kick drum sample just because it's the only other thing that I use. So if you have Logic or any other DAW, you'll have access to all of the tools that I used during this whole video process. It's been super fun. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you with my next one. Bye.